would say I read quite a few classics in my lifetime, and today I want to rank them all in a very official, formal ranking system. Because I already have quite a few books in here, I decided not to include anything that's not a novel except a couple plays. So there's no poetry in here, there's no, epics like the Iliad or the Divine Comedy. None of that is in here. It's literally just novels and I think 2 plays. I read some of these back in my old days in university, so I don't remember much of some of these stories, to be completely honest with you. Even Odysseus on his 10-year journey would probably not be able to trace back on my memory lane the information about some of these books. So we're just gonna do our best with my foggy memory of some of them. So before I even start, let's just go through the ranking system because that's just the most important. Okay, so here we have our ranking system and it's based on Friends. If you haven't watched Friends, go and watch 10 seasons and then come back to this video when you're ready, because you just gotta get these references, like if you don't get the references, it's just not gonna hit. So the first that we have, top tier, She's Your Lobster. These are the type of books that are my soulmates. We are locking our little clasps and walk aside one another for the rest of my life. These are my top tier books. These are crème de la crème. Next we have How You Doing. These types of books are books that I'm looking at them, I'm like, I see what you did there, I like you, let me take you out on a date, let's have a good time together. These are those type of books. Next we get to a little bit mediocre type of books. So he's not boring, he's just low-key. These are books that I know they're classics for a reason, and I'm scared to call them boring because obviously they are masterpieces of literature, but they are boring. Next, Oh, I'm Sorry, Did My Back Hurt Your Knife? These are books that stabbed me in the back. These are disappointments. These are books that I expected them to be something and they were just really not delivering on any aspect that I expected them to. And then the last one is You Have to Stop the Q-tip When There's Resistance. And the Q-tip here is the metaphor for these books. I should have just stopped the book. There's resistance from my soul, from my body, physically. I should have stopped, but I decided not to because I'm stubborn and I just keep going with books even when it should have been a DNF a long time ago. Alright, let's get into it. I will try my best to not ramble on because there's 81 books on this list. First book is Of Mice and Men. This is a very recent read of mine I read last month. This book was really, really good. It really hit the spot. First time that I read this book, or the first time I tried to read it, I didn't like it. The tone is very snappy. It's kind of reminding me of Hemingway a little bit, very like tuck, 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 tuck. There's not a lot of flowery language, and I didn't like that. But the story in and of itself is so good. The ending it's one of those endings you just have to stop and just admire life for what it is for 5 minutes and just think about what you read, and then you move on with your life and you're a different person. So this goes in How You Doing for sure. 1984, this is My Lobster. This is a book I also read quite recently and I did not expect to like this book as much as I did. In fact, it was one of those classics that was sitting on my shelves for like years and I was like, oh yeah, I'll get to it one day. And then I got to it and I was like, oh my god, this is so smart. There's so much in here about psychology, about history, about politics, obviously. The story, the plot itself is not that interesting, but the delivery of it, like the ideas that are explored in here are just freaking smart. George Orwell is the guy. Okay, here, what the hell is that? Because why is this not telling me what the story is? Okay, we'll get to it later. I don't know what that book is. We have here Wuthering Heights. This goes in How You Doing. I read this, was it last year or at the beginning? Yeah, last fall. And I really enjoyed it. I read it in November, as was recommended to me by so many people who have read this book. It's a very kind of atmospheric book, at least that's how it starts. So there's a lot of descriptions about the rain in November. It's really, really cool. And then it gets into a very toxic love story. This book invented toxicity. So if that's what you like, then go on and read it. Gabriel Garcia Marquez. This is Memories of My Melancholy Horrors, if I remember correctly the title, because I can't read it here. I think I'm gonna put this all, Oh, I'm Sorry, Did My Back Hurt Your Knife? I'm really excited to read some Marquez. It was the first time that I ever read one of his books. This is a novella, and it's a novella about an old man. He's 91, I think, on his birthday. He decides what he wants to do on his birthday, like he's on the brink of death. He wants to hire a prostitute. I think the idea explored here is interesting. There's definitely something to be explored there about, you know, getting old and what that means, and how someone would reconcile with himself the fact that he's so old and getting so close to death. But I just did not like it. I'm not a fan of magical realism, and I think that also played a role into how much I was able to enjoy the book. But I have read other books with magical realism that I liked, so this was just not it for me. I think it's a book you could skip. The Snows of Kilimanjaro by Hemingway. It's not boring, it's just low-key. So this is a collection of short stories. The Snows of Kilimanjaro is the main story in this collection. I really love that one. That one, it's maybe not My Lobster, but How You Doing for sure. But the remaining stories, a lot of them were really boring to me. I was just like trying to get through the collection. Not my first recommendation when it comes to Hemingway. Oh, Frankenstein. Oh yes. That's My Lobster. It's difficult to say my favorite, but definitely in the top 3 of my favorite books of all time. Frankenstein is one of those classics that you read in school and you fall in love with classics and with literature. The story is so much more than what media portrays the story of Frankenstein to be. First of all, Frankenstein in regular media is portrayed to be the monster. Frankenstein is actually the creator of the monster, the scientist. And it's a very sad story at its core. It's a story about alienation, solitude, a story about being different, a story about the craziness that wanting to be something more than what you are as a scientist and as a scholar can do to you. There's a lot to unpack there. It's a wonderful, wonderful story. And it's very, very atmospheric. Very atmospheric. Highly suggest you to read that for Halloween or just autumn in general. Ooh, The Sun Also Rises by Hemingway. I love this story. This goes in How You Doing. This is a story that is great to be read in summer. It's set in Spain, I believe. In a very sultry summer, and it's the story of a couple of friends just going about their life in Spain, going to parties, meeting girls meeting boys. What stands out here is Hemingway's writing and his ability to just really suck you in a story that there's not that much going on, but you just cannot stop reading because it's Hemingway. James Joyce. This was a portrait of the artist as a young man. This is my subjective experience with this book, okay? This rating, I have to say, none of these ratings are objectively about the books themselves, are my subjective experiences with these books, and I do have to put it in the lowest. I should have just stopped this book. This was such a difficult book to read. I think definitely part of it is because I don't have the necessary knowledge to just understand and appreciate James Joyce, for sure. I also thought it was just a boring book. The writing is so difficult to get through. Everything that you hear about James Joyce is true, you know? When people say he's one of the hardest writers to read, absolutely, hands down, one of the most difficult works I've ever read. And because of it, I think I just didn't have the knowledge and the brains to appreciate it, sadly. I saw what he was trying to do here. It's essentially the story of coming of age of a young artist. He is brought up in a very religious family, and there's a lot of restrictions to his childhood, and he tries to kind of bloom from that and find his own identity as an artist and as a person as he moves forward in his education. But I just did not enjoy it. I thought it was boring. I thought it was so long. I thought it was so hard to get through. There's just not a single bone in my body that wanted to continue the story. Ooh, next we have Charles Dickens, A Christmas Carol. This is My Lobster. Anything that Charles Dickens writes probably gonna be My Lobster. He's one of my favorite authors of all time. He's going to be writing about the corner of a room for 4 pages, and I'm gonna read every sentence of it and love it and delight in it. This is top tier Christmas delight. Everything about Christmas that you love is in this book. The movie adaptations, they adapt the actual plot of the story, but they don't adapt the juiciness of the story, you know, like the descriptions of all the food and all the atmosphere of Christmas. I think that's what really stands out in the story, and you just have to read it. You just have to read it for Christmas time. It's a law. I don't make the laws, I just follow them. Next we have Anne of Green Gables. This will go in She's Your Lobster. This is a series of 8 books. I haven't read them all yet. And it's just the story of this young lady. She is adopted by a family in the countryside. Sorry, not a family. two siblings in the countryside, and it's just the most wonderful story. Anne is the type of person who can really get on your nerves. She talks so much, and I remember starting this book and be like, I cannot stand this little girl, I want to shut her up. And then as you go on, I don't know what it is, but you just start to love the girl. You start to love the girl, the story, everything that happens is just her little life in the little countryside, and nothing really happens that is of major importance, and you just cannot stop reading. Anne's House of Dreams. I'll put it in How You Doing. I love all of the books in the Anne series, but they do get to be a bit repetitive at some point. You know, there's the same kind of things that happen over and over and over. We just follow Anne throughout her lifetime. I do like them all, but some of them are better than others. Then we have Dostoevsky White Nights. This is a really good story. I'll put it in How You Doing. It's a story about a man who is a little bit stalkery. Like, he's falling in love with a woman, but you could see it's not that healthy of a love or not that healthy of a connection, but you just can't help but feel bad for him. It's just a sad man's story, but it's written really well. Anne of Windy Poplars. This is my least favorite Anne book. I'll put it in just low-key. I feel that all of the books that were written after the war, because in this series, Ellen Montgomery wrote the Anne series, half of it, or I think the majority of it before the war, and she added a couple books, I think 3 books after the war. The books that were added after the war, I don't know why. The style is completely different, the plotting is completely different, the plotting is off. I do not like it. And this was definitely my least favorite. Anna Karenina. Ooh. I think this will have to go in She's Your Lobster, just for the character of Lenin. He is the only reason why this book goes in here. This is a masterpiece, first of all, obviously. It's the story of Anna Karenina, who is a little bit of a bitch, doing some whoring around, you know. She's a very despicable character. I don't like Anna, but I love Lenin. The characters of Anna and Lenin, they're kind of mirrors to each other, but opposed. The way the book is written, they're just kind of characters that showcase, I guess, virtue and morality and how a person's decisions can impact their life journey. Maupassant, Conte au fil de l'eau. You have to stop the Q-tip when there's resistance, you know? So Maupassant is one of my favorite French writers. Conte au fil de l'eau is a collection of short stories that he read. I cannot remember a single word that was written in this book. Like, this was just the most. Didn't have to read, boring, no impact on me or my life whatsoever type of book. I should have just not read it. We have The Comedy of Errors by William Shakespeare. I have not read a lot of his works. I will have to be very honest. I don't know how I did a whole literature degree with barely reading any Shakespeare. In fact, this one I read after I had graduated by myself. But yeah, I really enjoyed this one. This goes in How You Doing. This is a really, really funny story. The Murder of Roger Ackroyd by Agatha Christie. Did my back hurt tonight? So I always try to read Agatha Christie because so many people love her stories, and she is obviously an icon of literature. I just cannot get behind them. I just don't care. I find it so boring to try to figure out what happened. I was like, I don't care. Like, is this the story? I just don't care. Someone died. Okay, move on. I don't know. Let the police work it out. Why are we getting involved? I don't understand the appeal of the murder mystery type stories, and I just didn't like the story. And in fact, the next one that we have here, this was A Murder is Announced, and it's the exact same thing. I'm like, okay, I read it. I don't know what else to say about it. If Not Winter by Anne Carson. This is a collection of fragments of the poems from Sappho. I'll put it in How You Doing. This was really, really good. Oh, in fact, why is this on the list? I said I'm not gonna put any poetry. Oh well. I think I forgot to remove it, but yeah, this was really good. I really enjoyed it. I'm not a poetry person at all, but this was a good read. Secret Garden. Ooh. This will go in She's Just Low Key. I think this is a children's book for a reason. I'm not a child anymore. This is not my type of story. I'm usually a huge lover of a lot of writing about nature in books, but this was just not it for me. Boule de Suif by Maupassant. This one goes in top tier. She's My Lobster. Boule de Suif is a novella that is written by Maupassant. It's a story of a prostitute. Obviously, because she's a prostitute in French society back then, she's like really taboo. She's seen as this huge ex. I mean, it's still taboo in our time, right? But back then it was even more so. She was highly despised by everybody, and she gets stuck in a carriage with a little bit of the microcosm of French society. There's the priest, there's the family, I can't remember, there's I think a police officer in the carriage, so they're all stuck with her, and it's just this beautiful representation of what would happen when people are faced with one another and they have to kind of leave their stereotypes on the side, leave their judgments on the side so that they can interact with one another. And it's a really, really good story. Highly encourage you to read it. It's one of those classes that I think should be talked more about, so definitely recommend. The Great Gatsby will go in Dit my backpicture knife. I don't know what to tell you, I just didn't like it. I think this is one of those books that is just top tier for most people that read it. I did not like the writing, I did not like the story, I thought it was boring, I didn't care what parties they went to and what they did. Anne of the Island, is this the second one? I can't remember. I think this is, oh no, this is the third. I think this is the third in the story, and it will go in How You Doing. This one, Anne of Avonlea, was my favorite of the series and is the second one, I think. Anne of Green Gables and Anne of Avonlea are they equal, or do I like the second one just a bit better? I really like the second one because Anne is no longer a child. She stopped being annoying, and we get to see her be a young woman and try to kind of contribute to the community that she's in. And it's really, really interesting to just see her evolve into a person, you know, into an adult, and see what life looks like for her, what are her aspirations, what she wants to accomplish in life. Oliver Twist by Charles Dickens, obviously my lobster. All of Charles Dickens' books are my lobsters that I've read so far. It's a very sad story about a young kid who lives in an orphanage, and it's a little bit a social commentary on the orphanage crisis that happened back when Charles Dickens lived. Ooh, we have The Age of Innocence by Edith Wharton. I really like this book. This will go in How You Doing. I would say it's quite comparable to the plot line of Anna Karenina in some sense. Is the story of a man who falls in love with a married woman. Oh, no, it's the woman who falls in love with a married man. So it's quite similar to Anna Karenina in that respect. I really enjoy the setting of the book too. It's set in the golden age of New York. So you get this very fancy glitz New York, but you also get a little bit of the kind of older vintage Victorian kind of atmosphere, and so that blends in with the glitz and fashion and fabulousness of New York, and I really love that backdrop. We have Madame Bovary by Gustave Flaubert. I think this will go in How You Doing. This was a really good story. A lot of people like to say this is a feminist story about the hardships of a woman when she gets wedded and she has children. I completely disagree. I do not think this is a feminist story. I think this is a story of Flaubert being like, this is what happens when you make bad decisions and you are not grateful for what you have. And I'll leave it at that because I don't want to give spoilers, but I disagree that this is a feminist novel. I don't think it is. Ooh, The Last of the Mohicans. Okay, this, have to stop it. Have to stop it at the first word of the book, okay? This was probably one of the worst classics I've ever read. Just watch the movie, don't read the book. Metamorphosis by Kafka. This will go in How You Doing. This is not my type of cup of tea book. It's not very flowery language, it's not very descriptive, it's not very ambience-y, and it's really weird, and I don't like weird books. I'm a very vanilla type of person. I don't like weird books at all, but this was just, I had to give it like what it's worth, you know. It was just really well written, a lot of symbolism there. I really like what he did with the seasons, how the seasons matched the themes behind the book. It's the story of a man who just wakes up and he's a bug, and you kind of have to see what his loved ones, how they react and what happens. It's a very interesting commentary, I think, on, if I remember correctly, was it capitalism? Ooh, The Post Office by Bukowski. This will go in How You Doing. Okay, Bukowski is not everyone's cup of tea. I will not recommend The Post Office to the typical contemporary reader. Especially if you're a female and if you're a feminist, don't read this book. You're gonna hate it. I don't know how to explain. I have this kind of weird love for Bukowski and I don't know why. The man was a drunk. He hated women. He did not do anything of his life that was kind of virtuous and meaningful. He just went about his life working in a post office. So this is a little bit of a kind of autobiographical a little bit, and then he became a poet. I think the reason why I just really like him is because he's so authentic. Like, he just does not give a shit what anybody has to say. He's gonna say what he feels. It's the epitome of my feelings are valid and F you for everything else that you think about me and my feelings. He just doesn't give a shit, and I love him for it. But this, again, go into it with trigger warning. I don't think this would be the type of book the contemporary type of reader would like. Around the World in 80 Days. Ooh, this was really, really good. Is it My Lobster, or is it just How You Doing, though? I think it's My Lobster. I think it's probably My Lobster. I really love it. This is written by Jules Verne. It's the story of a man who wants to prove himself to a collection of high society Englishmen, and he's like, I am going to do the world in 80 days. Obviously, this happens when there's no, I think there's no airplane, so he has to do this travel on completely train and on ground and with boat. And you just see him go through the different countries and different cultures and experience all of those, and it's really, really interesting. I really loved it. We have Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. This will definitely go in My Lobster. This is a book that impacted me so heavily. I really, really enjoyed it. It's the story of a young man who decides to kill a woman. He's like, let me just kill a woman. Goes about his life, he's like, I just killed a woman. And then he has to deal with the consequences of that. And the consequences that are most disturbing that he has to deal with are not the actual legal consequences, but the psychological consequences that come with that. And it's obviously a psychological novel, but it's really, really well written. All right, we have here The Call of the Wild. I will put The Call of the Wild, I think I'll put it in a Lobster. I really enjoyed it. It's the story of a dog. I'm a huge animal lover. I don't think there are a lot of books out there written from the perspective of animals, or if they are, they're really dumbed down to how us humans understand animals, which is understandable because we are humans writing about them. But what I liked about this is that it tried to do a bit more than that. It tried to show more the animalistic, wild nature of animals, which comes through at the end of the book. I really love the beautiful connection between the animal and one of his human owners. So the dog goes through quite a few owners. He is sold from place to place to do jobs. There's obviously animal abuse in this book, so if you love animals, keep in mind it's a good book, but it does have animal abuse scenes in it for sure. The Crying Lot of 49. This will go in Stop the Q-Tip When There's Resistance. I know this is a classic, everybody loves it. I read it and I was like, what the F did I just read, and why did I waste my time reading it? Next we have The Prince by Machiavelli. I don't know again why I left this in here because this is not a novel. I will put this in boring, okay? This is the type of book that you read because you love literature and you're like, oh yes, I read The Prince by Machiavelli. There's nothing in here that is valuable to the contemporary reader, in my opinion. Machiavelli was, if I remember correctly, he was sentenced to exile from Florence, and he really wanted to go back home. He really wanted to go back to Florence, and so he decided he's going to write the best book about what it means to be a prince, so that the prince from Florence will let him come back to Florence, essentially. And I can't remember, I think he was pardoned at the end and he was able to return. So it's just kind of a manual of what it means to be a good prince, and that's just what it is. Read something else. Familia by Natalia Ginzburg. This is an Italian classic. I will put it in How You Doing. If I remember correctly, is the representation of the modern Italian family. So obviously Italian family and culture is really related to the nucleus of the family with the mother, son or daughter, and then the father. And here is a bit of decomposing that and restructuring it according to more modern outlooks on what a family is. It was an interesting book. I remember her writing was very snappy, kind of like Hemingway in a way. It was actually the first novel that I ever read in Italian when I was studying Italian. And so if you're studying Italian, you're looking for a novel that is easy to read, These sentences are very short and it's very easy language. I will highly recommend this one. Il Giardino dei Finzi Contini by Bassani. This is also an Italian classic and it roughly translates as the Garden of Finzi Contini, and I'll put this in How You Doing. This is a story of a man who falls in love with a young woman. She's Jewish and she is from a very affluent Italian family. He falls in love with her when the Second World War is kind of erupting, and it's a sad story. Obviously, you could imagine how it ends. We then have The Lonely Londoners by Sam Salvon. I don't remember much of the story. I think I'll put it in low key. I remember reading it and being like, okay, I read it. I think it's the story of immigrants in London and their hardships going through that process. The Richest Man in Babylon. This is a weird little book about the concepts of saving money and making money, and it's written from the perspective of a person living in Babylon. It's those types of books that you read, you're like, okay, I kind of knew all of these things from the modern reader perspective, and I don't know why I read this book, but fine. It's not a bad book, it's fine. The Yellow Wallpaper, I think I'll put in How You Doing. This is a really, really good book. The story of a married woman who is going through it, and her loving husband, instead of taking care of her properly, locks her up in the attic. He's like, you stay here and you think about what you did. And then she starts going a little bit crazy, as you can imagine, in the attic, and starts seeing things in the yellow wallpaper. David Thompson's writings. From what I can recall, this is a collection of David Thompson, who came to Canada in the 1600s, maybe 1500s, can't remember exactly the dates. And he just wrote from the perspective of a European what he thought about the cultures that were found here. I think I'll put this in low key. It was okay. What I mostly enjoyed from this was the way he described nature in Canada. I think obviously Canada is really well known for its wildlife and its nature and its flora and everything. And I really enjoyed reading those parts, but I don't recall much of the story, if I'm being completely honest. Oh, we're moving into a little bit of Austen. We have Northanger Abbey. I think this will go in My Lobster. This is my favorite Jane Austen book because it has gothic elements. It's a little bit different than the other ones. I find most of her novels are really repetitive in terms of the themes, and the characters are just copy-paste of each other in different contexts and different formats. After you read one Jane Austen, you're like, okay, I kind of read them all. My opinion, but I really liked Northanger Abbey more than the rest. There's Persuasion. I think I'll put in How You Doing. Good book. The same story as with all of her books, where it's a love story between two people in those times. Pride and Prejudice, the same thing. Put it in there. Les Souffrances du jeune Werther by Goethe. This one I'll put in How You Doing too. It's the story of a young man. He's quite young. He's in his early 20s, I believe, and he falls in love with an older woman, and he is just kind of dealing with that suffering of falling in love with an older woman. Alright, we had a little intermission and we're continuing. We have here Far From the Madding Crowd by Thomas Hardy, I think. This one will go in... It's weird because the book started really low for me. I hated it. I hated the writing. The writing is really hard to get through. He will write a whole paragraph of a sentence for him to say, oh, she looked over there. And you have to like decipher that through all those words. But in the second part of the book, the story really comes together and it's a fun story to follow. It's like between How You Doing and boring. I think I'll put it in How You Doing just because the ending, I loved it. It really reminded me a lot of Wuthering Heights towards the end. I think it's a bit of that same toxic kind of what the f is going on. So yeah, if you love Wuthering Heights, you could give this a try, but let me tell you, the beginning is rough. We then have A Room with a View by Forster. This one, I think I put in low-key. This book disappointed me a little bit. No, you know what? I think I'll put it in Did My Back Hurt Your Knife, because this book was a disappointment to me. I was really excited to read it. Part of the book is set in Florence, which is my favorite city on this whole entire earth. I was just really disappointed with the descriptions of the city. I was really looking for that Italian summer vibe from the book, and it didn't give it to me. So I'm sorry, I can't in good conscience put it higher than that. Okay, The History of Rasselas. This is, I don't even know what this is. This I read such a long time ago. I think I'll put You Have to Stop the Q-Tip. I don't know, it's just a story about a prince back in the day, zero value to my life. Zero value to have read this book to my life. Evelina is a good book. I think I'll put it in... See, I can't remember. I can't remember how I felt about it. I think I'll put it in low key, but it might just be how you're doing also. The Castle of Otranto by Horace Walpole is the OG Gothic story, as some of you know. I think I'll put it in low key. It's okay. It's the type of story that you read if you really want to get at the origins of the Gothic, but it's not the Gothic written in how we talk about the Gothic. It's more of a kind of a almost crazy story rather than a really Gothic spooky story in the way that we understand Gothic now. So, I don't know, when I read it I was like, okay, it's fine, it's whatever. Okay, Il Conformista by Alberto Moravia. This is another Italian classic. I'll put it in how you're doing. I really like this book. It's a book where Moravia is trying to examine what it means to become evil, why people are evil, and he did this in the historical background of Second World War, where Mussolini was in power. I liked it. It was a good book. Their eyes were watching God. I don't remember much from the story. I'll be very honest. I think I'll put it in low key, not because it might be a boring book, but just because I don't remember much from it. I read it for one of my classes in university. Their eyes were watching God. This was a really good book. I remember when I read it, I felt like the world changed because of this book for me, but I haven't read in a really long time, and I don't know that I would still feel those strong feelings for it anymore. So I'll just put it in how you're doing for now. This is a story set in the Great Depression, and it's the story of a priest and his wife. And to my recollection, they were adopting a kid, and it's just their struggles going through that period and their experiences with adopting this kid. But aside from that, I can't really pinpoint specific themes that I thought were really changing my world. Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. Oh yes, that's my lobster. This was my first Woolf, and it was a masterpiece. But the main character here is Mrs. Dalloway, who is throwing a party, and you follow her through the day throwing that party. There's also a side story, a man who was in the military and him dealing with PTSD from those experiences. And that was probably my favorite perspective in this book. This is one of those classics you just have to read. A Handful of Dust. This was okay. I think I'll put in low key. This has a really weird ending. Like, it's the type of ending that just does not make sense for the book, you know? I don't even know how to explain it because I don't want to give away what happens at the end, but it just does not in any shape or capacity follow the themes of the book, the tone of the book. It just ends in a completely wacky way. To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. I'll put this in how you're doing. I really enjoyed this book. It's set in summer, I believe, and we are on the coast of the sea near a lighthouse, obviously, and it's the story of a family who goes there to vacation. And it's written in this beautiful stream of thought kind of Virginia Woolf style. To Each His Own by Shasha. Okay, this book I'll put in... You have to stop the Q-tip. I just didn't enjoy the story. I am not a fan of murder mystery, as I said before. This is kind of a police investigation type of story, and I just could not care less. Oh wait, this is Frankenstein. I talked about Frankenstein before, but that was Dracula. I just remembered. Okay, so this is Frankenstein. It goes in, she's your lobster, obviously. And this one that I talked about before is actually Dracula. Yeah, Dracula would also go in She's Your Lobster. It's the OG vampire classic story. It's wonderfully written. I do have to say it did wander on in the second part of the book. I think the second part of the book should have been significantly reduced and edited out. There's like 150 to 200 pages where I think nothing much happens. Even with that portion that I think should have been edited, I still think it's a masterpiece. I love the beginning of this book. It kind of gets a little bit into the psychology of evil, how an evil monster would manipulate a person. I also love the descriptions of Romania. Obviously, I'm Romanian, so I love those descriptions, and I think the way he described Romanian people back in the day, Romanian people are definitely very traditional, and back in the day I think a lot of people were super superstitious, and I love how he brought that up in the book. Graham Greene, The Tenth Man, I think I'll put it in low key. This book is set after the Second World War in a concentration camp in France, and the prisoners that got released after the war and kind of their journeys forward. It was an interesting perspective. I don't know why I'm super interested in any documentation about that period a lot of the time, and I used to read a lot of works that were set in that time period, and so I kind of just appreciated for that, but aside from that, the story is just fine. Gli Occhiali d'Oro by Bassani, this will go in How You Doing. This would translate as the golden glasses or the glasses with golden frame. And this is the story of a homosexual man back in 1960s. I think a little bit after Second World War also, and it's just his journey trying to, go through life in a society that is not ready to accept him for what he is. The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. Okay, all these kids stories, they will just go in low key. I can't do kids. I can do kids story. Alice in Wonderland, the same. I will have to say that Alice in Wonderland is a little bit more than a kid's story. In fact, there's trinkets in there that would not even be recognizable to a kid. They're really there for the adults. And there's quite some dark stuff if you want to get into the nitty-gritty of, kind of the theories of what could have been written in there. So if you're interested in that, that's kind of one of those books that you can do that with. But aside from that, the stories themselves, the way they're written, just don't appeal to me. Black Beauty, I think I'll put in How You Doing, although it's a children's book, just because it's from the perspective of animals. As I said before, huge animal lover, and so for me, that's just something that I enjoy reading about in general. Candide by Voltaire, I think I'll put in, I'm sorry, I did my backward journal. I had really high expectations for Voltaire, and this book was just really weird. It's just really wacky. It's like he took a pill and then he wrote this book. That's how it felt to me. Peter Pan, low-key boring. Romeo and Juliet. Okay, this one I read a while ago. And I think I didn't have the necessary brain to enjoy it and to appreciate it. So I'll put it in low-key boring, but I think my opinion of it would be probably different if I would read it today. Animal Farm by Orwell. I think this will go in low-key boring. It's a good book from a historical and a political perspective. Obviously there's things to unpack there, but aside from that, I didn't really like it. I don't really like fable type stories, and that's really what this is. Although it's set with animals, it just didn't hit for me. Then we have Great Expectations, obviously My Lobster, written by Dickens. There's just no other option on this list. At this point I should have just called the top tier Dickens. Great Expectations is probably his most loved story, and I think it's for a good reason. I think if you get into Charles Dickens, Great Expectations should be your first book for sure. Elevo Dima dintre șaptea by Mihail Drumeș. This is a Romanian book, a Romanian classic. This would translate as The Student Dima from 7th grade, and this is My Lobster. It's up there with Frankenstein. It's hard for me to say, okay, this is my favorite book of all time, but it's definitely in the top 3. It's the most wonderful Bildungsroman that I've ever read. Essentially the coming of age story of a young man. You see him grapple with his own identity, with sexuality, with romance, his first love, obviously. You see him grapple with education. You see him try to understand the world and make a place for himself in this world. The story at its core, I would say it's a love story. It's a very intense, passionate love story. But from that, there's just so much more that is explored about him trying to blossom into a person, into an adult, into someone who will bring some value to the world and to his community and to his country. Art, discussions about art and culture in there. I just love this book to bits. I cried my eyes out at the end. Oh my gosh, I think it's actually not translated in English if I'm not mistaken, and I definitely think it should be. I think this would be a huge hit internationally if it were translated. It's a really, really good book. Enigma Otiliei, this is also a Romanian classic, and this will also go in My Lobster. This translates as The Enigma of Otilia. And Otelia is this young woman who is grappling with the choices that she has as a woman in late 1800s or early 1900s in Romania. So essentially her choices are limited: either follow love or find a place for herself in society. Obviously, you know, as women were not able to acquire wealth, they had to ensure that they got married to a person who was able to provide them with social status and economical status as well. And so this is what really the book is getting at, trying to explore how a woman would go about making these choices for herself. The picture of Dorian Gray, how you doing? This is a really good story, obviously very beloved classic about a man who lets his vanity get the best of him. To Kill a Mockingbird, that's also a really known and loved classic. I think it will go in low key for me because when I read it, I was in high school and I think I just couldn't enjoy it as much as I would enjoy it today. I think the rating for this book would be different if I would read it today. Tom Sawyer, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer by Mark Twain. I think this will go in How You Doing. I enjoyed this book. It is just the stories of a stupid kid. That's just what it is. And it just brought back a lot of nostalgia for me. It reminded me a lot of the stupid things that I used to do as a kid. Brave New World. I think I'll put it in low key. I think it's an interesting story. Obviously, it's a dystopian work about a future in which a lot of individuality and freedom is restricted, so very similar to the themes of 1984. But just the delivery of this book, the way it was done, there's something about it that I just couldn't quite connect to, if that makes sense. So I appreciate it for what it is, but in terms of the reading experience, it was just not the most enjoyable. Le Lion by Joseph Kenan. This is the story of a lion. I think I'll put it in How You Doing. I really enjoyed this book. It's a story about a young girl who befriends a lion. And if I'm not mistaken, this is actually a real story that was written afterwards as a novel. Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. This will go in She's Your Lobster. I read this book such a while ago and I really wish to reread it. I actually don't even have a copy. When I read it first, I borrowed a copy of a friend to read it. I just remember enjoying every single moment of reading the book. Sense and Sensibility. This will go in Did My Back Hurt Your Knife? This is my least favorite Jane Austen. I remember dreading going through this book. I thought it was so long and so repetitive with all of her other stories. Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse. I think I'll put it in Did My Back Hurt Your Knife? This is a story that I did not enjoy reading. It's the story of Siddhartha, who went on a quest of enlightenment in Buddhism. It just didn't land for me. And it's not Hermann Hesse, it's just, I think, the story and the way that the story was written. Because I have read other works of his. I read a couple of his essays and I'm so in love with his writing. But this book just didn't hit. Giovanni's Room, this will go in How You Doing. This is a really good story. I'm not exactly sure why it's not in She's Your Lobster. I feel like, you know, those top tier books, you feel something when you read them. Like, it's just a feeling of, okay, this book is just it. I didn't get this feeling with this book, but I really enjoyed the story. It's the story of two men who fall in love in France. It's set in 1950s, I think. But it's obviously two men who are not really allowed to express their love and be in love on the outside world. And so they have to do it in Giovanni's room, in one of the men's rooms. It has a lot of very sultry summer vibes. So this is definitely the type of book that I would recommend reading in the summer. And lastly, we have a novella by Dante Alighieri. And this is Vita Nuova, which means a new life. I'll put this in How You Doing. This is the story of a man who falls in love with a woman without ever speaking to her, and he is head over heels for this woman, and he's in love with her, this woman that he's never spoken to for years and years and years, and then he writes a book about her. So this is really the OG of if he wanted to, he would. All right, there we have it. I think this is a nice little bell curve-ish, a little bit skewed towards the top, but still a little bit of a bell curve with most books and how you're doing. I do have to say that in general, I do enjoy classics quite a bit, and so maybe that's why, you know, most books are towards the top for me. But the ones that are in She's Your Lobster, these are top tier. And if you take anything from this video, is that you should read any one of these. Alright, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you're having a lovely day, and I'll see you soon.